I think that perhaps we can open to have any questions or comments that can work now, which is difficult after this, but I know.
I'll do it in English so they understand. Just first of all, thank you so much for your presentations. They were really beautiful, and it was like a privilege to witness them. And I would like to ask Samia, well, actually both of you, about the reception of this work, of both of your works. I know the Framer Frame project, and I would be very interested to understand how it's received in times of genocide, in different contexts where these connections are quite clearly made in your work. And I think it's quite important to understand how this context that we're living in reframes the things that are being exposed, the way that things touch one another when you exhibit or make things public, especially this kind of work. Thank you.
Thank you. Reception. Both, right?
Yeah.
I think it's really important to speak about the reception. If you want, I can start and you can. Yeah. Okay. Sorry. Yeah. Yeah. So the exhibition was inaugurated on October 7, 2023. Yeah? It was the days after we were really. I mean, it was really, really difficult. I think the team of Frame a Friend is, and also If I Can Dance, are very efficient, effective, and generous. So we had many conversations, and we did use the space as a space, really the space of the exhibition. One of the stations was we could remove it so that we could create larger space. So we used the space of colonial toxicity to talk about colonial toxicity. So there were many public events, discussions, readings, grievings as well. So yeah, it's they really. I mean, everyone. I mean, it was not based in Amsterdam, but really the team did really a great work in making this space as a space for conversations and for sometimes conflict. That's also part of what we also have to do. So the exhibition traveled afterwards. I give a lot of tours wherever I am. I use it as a tool of conversation as well. So we talk about not only this exhibition, but how this space, how this exhibition remind us of many other events around the world. At the Mosaic Rooms, also the team of the Mosaic Rooms, extraordinary. So we organized also lots of conversations and tours, but also panels around these themes. So it really depends on the team. To be very honest, on the people who host the exhibition. Now at Brown University, it was part of the media elements conference. So we also talked a lot about what's happening around the world, absolutely, and the genocide and the legacies of colonial rule, absolutely. Sorry.
Thank you for the question. So in real time, if I'm in the space and I'm sort of there for the public to witness, as we walk around the work, oftentimes people feel overwhelmed. They necessarily don't know exactly what they're looking at. And when I'm present and can share my questions or concerns, it's like a light switch comes on, and I can feel both anger and possibilities in audiences in real time. And when I start talking about the sort of spectacle of violence, spectacle of genocide up against a sort of slow violence and environmental violence, an embodied violence that happens over time, and this idea of the ongoing colonial slave capital, hyper-capital project as some place where we have to create spaces of autonomy, even in enclosures. So those are the kinds of conversations that happen often one-on-one. When a curator or someone calls me and says, or interviews someone and asks me a question around, either the haptic nature of the work, that I invite people in to touch and see, and I get to the conversation around sensoria and the haptic, why things are disappearing and being blown up and being always fractured. So that is a conversation about what do we do with remnants? What do we do with the fragments? And I say, well, I don't think that deconstruction or the dismantling of the physicality of colonial project, those things are fragments. I think these things are whole. Like when you break something that is intent on your demise, I don't think that what is broken apart are fragments. I think the pieces become wholes, right? So I think that it depends on the conversation, where I am. If I'm in, if I'm available, I'm there to talk about it. Oftentimes when people are witnessing the paintings and talking about water and ideas of extraction, those are really clearly an argument for you cannot extract unless you abstract. There is no extraction without abstraction. And as an artist, that's my fidelity, to get inside that conversation, right? And to really invent towards new forms that really deal with art as an embodied experiences of sensorias that are trans-historical. So in the work, it is the work I make work, and I intend it to be beyond me. I'm not into comprehension that way. Right? So we often have conversations about comprehension and who's this work for. And I said, well, when I'm an ancestor and people are born beyond me, then they will figure something out that I could not possibly have figured out as a maker. So I'm both working to, exhaust the possibilities of my own ancestorship and the ancestorship that I inherit. So it gets into that poetic realm as well. So it depends on how it is received. It's really super subjective.
Había una pregunta.
Great. Thank you both for fantastic presentations. They were really thought-provoking. And we've been talking a lot about collecting, about archives and repositories, because there's so much related to the museum and its kind of colonial imperial, right, expandedness across time and the globe. But what's interesting about both the work you do is that in your work, the body has become a kind of repository. It holds histories, it holds memory. And I'm wondering in what way, if the body is an archive in your respective projects, how are you thinking about moving forward with that, and how is that useful in new projects or new things that you're working on?
Yeah, sure. So one of the things that I've changed recently, or I'm pivoting towards recently in my practice, is the language again, this idea of performance, performance, performance. And I'm requiring from myself when I make things to be inhabited or to be embodied or experienced in real time. I want to make more than, I want to produce an acrobatic. I want to be able to have a sort of projection of thought and projection of thought onto an object where you can see yourself, moving around it, flying around it, sitting on it. So there's a certain level of in the sculptural work specifically, there's a certain ask that I require of the installations where the curiosity feeds the looking and the slow looking happens and then the fast movement happens. So these sort of, I call them choreographies of indeterminacy, right? So I'm trying to push forward with that, where there's more conversations around radical engineering, where, the balance and weight and scale of the thing really, of the object really, I think, provokes a kind of condition, where you're thinking about dams and you're thinking about levees and you're thinking about infrastructure in a way that you feel the vulnerability in your body, right? So this transference of, I say to people when I start talking about this, is architecture and infrastructure of improvisation and indeterminacy. That means that there's so much in the establishment of city spaces, urban spaces, where the engineering piece is completely unknown and invisible. So what does it mean to bring up those sort of engineering feats to the surface of a sculpture and then ask people to understand and feel the cantilever, feel the density, and experience line, but when line becomes, I'll say, when line becomes volume and volume becomes plane, right? And thinking about that as a movement towards something that's always classified as performance, but something that's more about the acrobatics needed to defeat a sort of colonial logic. And at the same time, establish a semi-autonomy. So you can have freedom, as Ronaldo was talking about, where people do not overdetermine your comportments. And you're free from that and you're liberated from that. And there's no history that I can go to that's more, I think, effective than history in my own body from the history of self-liberators from the transatlantic slave trade. From silence to wailing, every register in between has to, for me, transfer into the work. And it is, then I've arrived at a discursive form.
Yeah, thank you for the question. So for me, it's really an invitation to listen to what victims went through. When I started this project, I was not really sure how to include them. I did interview or discussed with people. Sometimes I was allowed to record, sometimes I was not allowed to record, but those conversations made me really aware of the importance of listening, that we, meaning as, let me use the term, consumers of knowledge or of exhibitions, see those exhibitions. So the way that your body is impacted if you read a book or you visit an exhibition is absolutely different from when you speak with someone who is telling about what he they went through. So that experience, that transmission of the experience, that I would say also suffering and rage, lots of people are extremely upset. because they didn't know. They were not told. Not only the Saharan population, also the French veterans. So they're extremely upset. And if you speak with them or read what they wrote, you will not forget. And for me, that was really important for us to go through this and to try to remember. I mean, you can forget images because we see 1 million images per day, but I hope that we won't forget what people went through and say that how they went through what they went through. So that was for me really important to include. I didn't know how to include it. And I remember many people said, yeah, but people don't read these witnesses. And I remember the Observatoire des Armements, which is a French NGO based in Lyon. They have 2 folders of witnesses. And they said, look, people come here and they look for reports. And nobody has the time to go through them. I was so offended and so, how do you say, felt so embarrassed even. Like, you don't have time to go through 700 pages and you do your work. You have to have time. This is all your life. I mean, you cannot do it in 10 days or 2 months. These are years of work and we have to go through 700 pages and read them. This is what I did. I selected 40 witnesses because they were really covering unique experiences and also extremely impactful. How this will impact the work I do in the future, I really don't know. Each time, it really depends on the subject and on the work I do. Each time things change. In a way, the difficulties that I encounter dictate the forms that repositories, books, exhibitions, or websites take. But I think what I really somehow appreciated or learned from is the feedback of we call them participant translators, of the 20 people who helped us go through that. I mean, they were transformed by the reading of 2 witnesses. And I also know that many students and researchers and NGOs around the world, that they are using them. There are only 40. If we have more resources and if we have very rich people who don't know what to do with the money, we can invest in translating more because there are many more witnesses. So the impact of the text, of the memory of the victims is very powerful.
Bueno. Okay. Sí, sí.
Sí. Oh, pardon. Sí. Sorry.
No me quería dar la oportunidad de intentar hacer una pregunta y aprovecho también de agradecer a las personas que están traduciendo. Lo han hecho increíble. Muchas gracias a los amigos que están haciendo ese trabajo. Hay una pregunta por el espacio, hay una pregunta por la construcción de geografías, hay un intento por pensar otros modos de habitar. Ya sabemos, nos dijo la hermana, serán nuestras hijas, nuestras nietas las que probablemente tendrán que seguir reflexionando, pero dejémosles sospechas. ¿Cuál es ese espacio que tenemos que construir? ¿Cuáles son esas infraestructuras que tenemos que generar? ¿Cuáles son esos habitares que tenemos que producir? Eso.
I think that because I'm a producer, I make exhibitions, and I try to make exhibitions when visitors come inside of that exhibition, that they feel some kind of tenderness and care, and that there's an awareness that not only are they in an institution, a building, a museum, but then they've stepped into my space where both the paintings, the drawings, and the sculptures have the ethos of liberation, right? So the energy, the work, the scent, the taste of the exhibition has to be at the register of freedom. And so I don't, the reason I talked about needing an infrastructure for my practice and having established Black comp and hypershapes is because I have a propensity for moving towards and understanding encounters, like moments of tension and moments of encounters. So when I recognize that, I can then comprehend world building, world unbuilding, and world rebuilding. So habitats not only need to support revolutionary politics, but they also, for me, need to sort of undo or unpack what we know physiologically about the world that we live in, right? So if I am built of water and I am, and I oftentimes, I talk about, I say I'm painting a painting of a painting. And what I mean by that is when I'm in the zone of making a painting about Blackness, I super go to an atomic level. Right? I super go to the things that I cannot name about my body because my body is made of so many. And I need to trust that when I'm in the studio, in the gallery, in the museum, all of it is the same. All of it is a lab. All of it is an experiment. And what the museums allow is a condition of scale, right? So it's about a kind of embodied experience in an infrastructure of creativity that gets you to click in understanding why why the levees broke. You understand me? So when I figured out the terror of underdeveloped infrastructure from a city in Chicago, because I'm from Chicago, the city where I understand viaducts, trains, I understand the sprawling downtown of high rises, and then my people come from New Orleans that survived Katrina. Those folks came from Alabama, and the trans-historical condition of surviving the genocide of Native Americans, the continued recolonization of the South, all of that is one. It's ongoing. There are peaks and valleys. There are different geographies, but I have to understand how sprawling it is, right? And I have to understand through making the multi-scalar condition in which oppression comes in. So when you're coming into the habitat of my installations or in the paintings or in the clearings that I try to make with my work, my condition is to propel you to understanding how these networks inform and how your physiological condition can resist those and refuse those things by recognizing the so-called invisible, by understanding the distance from your house to extraction points, by understanding the onslaught or the impending the growing extraction conditions of all kinds, right? So the paintings are very aware of foreground, background, middle ground, right? So the sculptures, in my mind, all of it is the same. But as an artist, my push is to undo those logics that lock you in to both over-determining what your body can do and over-determining what your body is owed to the capital condition. All of that needs to be frayed in relationship to the habitats that I'm trying to create in museum spaces. So things do fall apart. They're supposed to, right? An art is supposed to try to think about how do you expand when you try to tear things apart? How do you expand with that tearing and that breaking up to acknowledge the whole of yourself in the middle of those things.
Yeah. Did you use the term in Spanish espacio? Space, spatio, space. No, just because for me space, in architecture. Just asking. So, no, but we can interpret space in many ways, so very often, but didn't know if it's like a site, a space, or but maybe if you accept, maybe we can go to this term habitat, and you also used it right now. I think because for me space means so many things, but we can maybe later discuss it, because I'm afraid I will give like a very long response. But if we focus on habitat, at least I know what it is, because space can be many things. And it's also about the not only the physical, the psychological. I mean, for me, these are very two important modes of existing. Yeah, we have the physical, the psychological, etc. But if we focus on habitat, I think it's really so important for me to ask the question: who is enabling, creating the habitat, and for whom? So what these exhibitions and this work is doing is addressing the imperial colonial institution. There are many associations in Algeria and France who are really fighting for their rights, and they are from day one, to be very honest. So they are active in safeguarding and trying to protect their habitat. And I think what this work is doing is to confront the institution with the habitat that they created for others without even asking them and informing them. They were not aware. And that habitat is irreversible, is toxic, contaminated, polluted. And who has to repair it? Who has to clean it? We know who, but the question is when. And how this kind of work and many other works, this is not the only one, and we don't exist in a vacuum, of course. No, it's really like a continuation of the work, as you said, people before us and people after us, etc. But the question is like, how do you put pressure on those who have to make these people have an habitat of dignity? It's like the basic conditions that a community can tolerate. This is, for me, really important, and that's what institutions, including museums and universities and other institutions, have to really guarantee. It's, as many people say, enough is enough. Yeah, but we have to practice it. This is. It's not like a work that museums are interested in because you cannot buy it. It's not creating any value. It's telling stories and histories of people who did not choose to be in that reality, but they are in it. So that's the habitat that these institutions have to repair.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.